As it's October, we wanted to bring you some spooky tips to help your horror writing. So any of you who are working on a horror novel, these tips are for you. And if you're not, well, maybe think about writing a short story or something like that, as of course we have Halloween rapidly approaching. So in this video, I'm going to give you 6 tips to improve your horror stories, your horror writing. Again, please like, comment below, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. You don't want to miss out on more of the great writing tips that we have coming your way if we don't scare you off in this video. Tip number 1 is the uncanny valley. So this sounds a very odd term, and quite frankly, I had to do a bit of research on it. But the uncanny valley is an idea that when you're constructing the villain or the monster in a horror novel, you want to ideally choose a monster that is almost human. So the idea is that it's most terrifying, or we as readers, as humans, what we find most terrifying is something that is close to being human, but not quite. So it lacks some of those key characteristics that a human would have. A good illustration of this, a good example of this, is something like a store mannequin, where in essence it is meant to represent a human, but of course it doesn't look human. And if you imagine a mannequin walking around of its own accord at night, that would be very strange and terrifying, because of course it's almost human but not quite. So that's the general idea. Of course, you'll have to use your imagination to figure out other ways that you can do this. Artificial intelligence is another example of something that's human-like, but of course lacks the main characteristics, and therefore makes a good villain in a horror book. Tip number 2 is to use the monster as a metaphor for something that the main character is dealing with. So if it's internal grief or something like that, it's more impactful to the reader if the monster or the villain is actually a demonstration of something internal. So if it's a representation of internal emotions or things they've experienced, that is of course even more terrifying. So that is tip number 2. Tip number 3 is to use strong images. And when I say images, I mean that when you create your scenes, don't just describe it visually. You also want to reference tastes, smells, sounds. These other senses are really important to create that feeling of dread or terror, and they're often neglected in books because we are so focused on creating the visual element, but we forget that by referencing these other senses, it's going to make the entire scene more impactful. So that is tip number 3, is to make sure you are using and referencing all the scenes to really draw, all the senses to really draw the reader in. Tip number 4 is to control the atmosphere and the tone. So the more you can control the atmosphere and the feeling that you are giving the reader, the more you're going to be able to build up that sense of dread, draw them into the story, and of course then it will have much more of an impact when you hit them with the surprise or the jumpy moment in the story. The other items you need will be the color palette. So as part of that, make sure you're adding in the color palette and also the character's emotions. All of these are going to help you with tip number 4. Number 5 is to juxtapose comedy, lightness, or scenes of intimacy and family into the horror book that you're writing. The reason this is particularly effective is if in a horror novel it becomes too much about the fear, the dread, the monster, the reader will become a little bit removed or detached from caring about the character and seeing the human elements to, of course, the victims potentially in your story. You still need the reader to really connect with them and have a strong emotional connection with those characters in order to want to read the whole way through the book. because they care about those characters. And by showing those moments of lightness, family, it's also going to heighten and highlight the terrifying moments, because it reminds the reader that these are real people that have been put in an unnatural or extreme situation. So tip number 5 is to juxtapose lightness, comedy, family with the terror in your horror novel. And to finish on tip number 6 is to utilize suspense. So I couldn't make a video about writing a horror novel or story without mentioning suspense. Suspense is the key to ensuring that you hold the reader and you deliver a spooky story. I always like to reference The Woman in Black as an excellent example of leveraging suspense. It's not gory, it's not particularly terrifying, but suspense is leveraged so well. So if you're looking for tips, I would definitely recommend checking out The Woman in Black for some tips. We hope you've enjoyed this video. Hopefully it wasn't too spooky for you, and hopefully those tips will help you to write more engaging horror or stories. Once again, please do like, comment, subscribe, and we will see you in the next video.